Each candidate's going to be allotted 15 minutes today to speak at the microphone as they see fit. They'll use that time however they want to. It's up to them. They can ask for questions, or they can use it entirely in moderation. We don't care. The candidates last time were called up in alphabetical order, so I think this time I'm going to reverse the order, and I'll start with Michael Tinberg. Michael?
Folks, I'm going to pass out, just for your reminder, this is just a quick summary of the 10 points they had online. You don't mind passing those around the room. You'll be able to read my detailed stuff online. Okay. All right, folks. You guys want to move up? No? Okay. Folks, thanks for coming. Most of you know me. As I mentioned, my background is posted online, so I'm not going to bore you with the details. But in summary, folks, good, bad, right, or wrong, I am not part of the Bentwater establishment. You probably won't see me sitting at the cool kids table too often. I'm okay with that. I'm an independent thinker. Try as some might, I won't be bullied, I won't be intimidated. But I welcome and I prefer new ideas and challenges, because folks, in all candor, that's the only way a person can grow their mind, is by listening to new ideas, being challenged, having healthy, for lack of a better word, civil discourse, okay? A politician I am not, but I do bring hands-on practical experience to the table, folks. And I believe we have to look at our POA as a business, as well as an association, as well as a nonprofit. We have to look at it as a business. I also bring perspective. I spent several years of my life in the acquisitions world. I bought and sold 350 companies. My job there was one job and one job only. I would go in, I would assess the operation, I'd make it efficient, and we'd make it profitable. And I plan to bring those skills to the POA, because I have found there's not an operation anywhere that cannot become more efficient with different sets of eyes on it, okay? I've also got 23 years on my own, making decisions on how to spend my money and not how to spend other people's money. And if anybody doesn't think there's a difference between spending your own money and spending other people's money, I ask you to reconsider that, because there's a huge difference there. Well, that said, folks, 3 months ago I stood in this room and I told a total of about 300 residents over a 3 or 4 hour period that I would not run for the POA office. I literally changed my mind at 4:30 on nomination deadline date, August the 10th, all right? And I did that because I looked back, I listened to residents, and I really believe, folks, we need a different culture in our POA, not only the institution of our POA, but also in our community, all right? And on that note, folks, I want to mention something. A lot of what I'm going to talk about, Terry Bowie's our president, 99.99% of what I'm going to talk about did not occur under his leadership. Terry, you've been tireless for this community. I thank you, and I'm sure the residents thank you as well. So thank you very much. So folks, let's talk about culture. I think it's important to understand what culture is, all right? Culture, by definition, is an integrated pattern of behavior, a set of shared attitudes and practices that characterize an organization. I want to repeat that. An integrated pattern of behavior, a shared set of attitudes and practices that characterize an organization. And then it closes by saying, and then they were passed on to the next generation of that organization. A healthy culture is vital to our POA. So I want to talk a little bit about the culture that I have seen and events that have transpired in our community in the last 12 to 15 months that, to me, tell us what our culture is, okay? Not completely, but it tells us what a big piece of our culture has been. In terms of messaging, folks, we've been told we're not allowed to ask questions. We've been told this is not a democracy. We've been told we don't get to vote because we're uninformed. Past leaders have called us boo-birds. They've told us we live in pits of despair and that we should move if we don't agree with something that's being done. A current trustee told some 200 people in the May board meeting that if we believe in outsourcing, we need to have our head examined just because we disagree with the decision to outsource. I don't suspect there's a person in this room that believes that is an appropriate comment to come from our trustees toward our residents. And they're dangerous words, folks, especially coming from a trustee and our leadership who has a fiduciary responsibility to not only respect us, but to look out for our best interest. And where's the accountability for such a statement? There's also very real efforts throughout our community to censor, both in social media as well as in open board meetings. A recently resigned trustee told me in a meeting back in April that they weren't going to adhere to a certain section of our bylaws because we're just not going to do that. Folks, that's conscious disregard for our bylaws. Our leadership has gone as far as to say we have disdain for social media and the people who engage in social media. I personally have the belief that we must engage social media. Our demographic is changing, and if we don't figure out a way to work with social media, we will not be successful as a leadership group. Yet, despite that disdain, a trustee just a week ago went to social media with a several thousand-word post to resell the board's decision to self-manage. Upon challenge from members and critical analysis from members, that trustee removed the post. Despite requests by the members to repost and re-engage, that trustee refused to do so. And that same trustee has been on social media in the past 72 days, and according to some members, commented were degrading and insulting comments. And then again went silent and wouldn't respond to requests to clarify or talk about his positions. We've also had a trustee unfortunately resign 4 months ago because of harassment and personal attacks to his family. Such claims were never produced or verified, but yet they were perpetuated by someone somewhere. And folks, there's no room in our community at any level, among residents, leaders, or anywhere else, for personal attacks, inferred or otherwise. I've spoken to select board members. I've spoken to this trustee. None of those alleged comments came from me, and they never will. I will hold myself to a higher standard than that. Faced with an unfortunate petition for removal 90 days ago, we even had a trustee unleash profanity against residents in this room. Now, there's no room for that either. But what concerned me the most about that is defiance, stating, we will never resign, we will never step down, despite the wishes of the community. And we had several hundred residents sign that petition. Such defiance is dangerous, folks, in any culture, at any level. We must respect those that elected us. Folks, I have here in my hand an email that was sent to me at 7:03 Thursday morning after our last meet and greet. I can't even read it. It's somebody expressing displeasure to me because I dared to say I wanted to change the way our board did certain things. There's no room for this, folks. I'm sorry. And in the end, if there's no accountability for this stuff, if there's no accountability for this messaging, the toxic and vile words, folks, will become toxic. They will perpetuate throughout our community, and it will poison our community. It must stop at all levels, whether it comes from residents, leaders, or anywhere else. It must stop. And if we disagree with somebody, let's just sit down and talk about it and see if we can find some common ground. Okay? It's not that hard. After all, we're friends and neighbors first. As trustees, we are here to serve you. You don't need governing as residents. And if we enter into our trustee role thinking you need governing, I believe this institution will fail in the long term. Moving on, we were told in February, folks, and this was very disconcerting to me, that we don't have the volunteer base in our community to build the new POA building. We proved the board wrong. What bothers you the most is we were never asked. Despite requests, we were never involved. To this day, I can give you members' names who offer to contribute in other areas of the POA, and their offers go denied or simply unresponded to. Why would we not want resident input and advice? We are one of the most successful communities on the lake. We have a wonderful resident base. We have a broad base of expertise, educational expertise, experience, executive all the way down to whatever else it may be. We can and should listen to resident input. Why did it take a petition for removal to get our leaders to listen? It shouldn't have been necessary. On April 2nd, folks, I went and I told the board, the building's over-engineered. They disagreed, did not want any more input. But folks, guess what? The building was over-engineered. Asked the building committee. And the board has now agreed the building was over-engineered. I think that's all good. And as a result of resident input, we've saved, I think, and I don't know the exact numbers, I don't think it's done yet, but the last number I saw was 13% okay? Think what could have happened if the residents had been involved possibly earlier, okay? Based on experience, folks, in my perspective, and what I've observed over the past 12 to 15 months, I'm here to tell you that I personally believe, and I'm not privy to the details operationally of our POA, but what I've seen and what I'm trained to see and trained to understand is that our POA is operationally over-engineered now as well. And I think we're probably getting in our own way, okay? But our leaders still refuse to entertain input. We've offered to assist on the gate process. Requests were denied. On 531, urgent, get your passes today. 50 days later, be patient with us. We're still learning. Now we know it's imminent. Here's my question, folks. What if we'd accepted the help from residents? Would the project be a little more efficient? I don't know. Could we have saved money? I don't know. And self-management, that was a unilateral decision by our board, folks, with no input from residents and no opportunity for alternatives. And why go to social media to defend it if it's working well? It raises a question. It raises a serious question I think we need to answer. Rules, folks, I'm going to start moving quickly because I'm going to be out of time. Rules matter. There was a discussion on next door about that, and there's overwhelming concurrence that rules matter. We have to make sure we follow the rules and don't make any mistakes. We have to make sure of that, okay? But a trustee asked the community just last week, do you expect us to break the law? No, we don't expect our institution to break the law, but we want the law followed, and we don't want it selectively followed. That's what's important, okay? Despite member requests 3 months ago, folks, to make our bylaws more member-friendly, we haven't heard anything about that yet, okay? Now, I want to talk about our financials, folks, because this is important. Our financial statements are not distributed in a timely manner and prepared in a timely manner, okay? That casts a shadow. As an ex-CFO, that casts a shadow over the very integrity of those statements because the financials tell a story. We're never going to have financials for January, folks. Our audit for last year was late against our bylaws. It's going to be late this year. It's a violation of our bylaws. A trustee, when questioned about the timeliness of the financials, was told to sit down because it's not a proper question. And our public information filings, I have them with me if anybody wants to see them. Every one of them is wrong, folks. Every one of them is wrong. We are listing as officers of our corporation with the state of Texas, officers that have not held office for 15 months. All executed in the last 5 months. Little things matter. Little things matter. We all know, as business people, such financial reporting practices would not be tolerated in the private sector. It's just that simple. Where's the accountability at our level? I want to talk about reserves quickly, folks. This is important, okay? What's important in reserves, folks, is not the absolute number, in my opinion, it's the percent funded. And best I could not find where we have discussed this or to share with the community now. Based on our June 30th street fund balance, we're about 35% funded, okay? And that puts us in the lower quartile of the fair to good category, with 69% being the best. Our board will tell you that the reserve study says that that's where most POAs are. That's what it says. That's where most POAs are. That doesn't mean it's okay. The benchmark, as I understand it, is 87%, and I can document it. That should be our goal, because we've always said Bentwater's worthy of the best, right? We're a fine community. Folks, think about something. We are sitting on $1.3 plus or minus billion worth of assets in our community, the overwhelming percentage of which is our homes. The reserve study goes on to tell us that if the reserve fund is less than 70% funded, lower property values will result. And we all know that intuitively, but it hasn't been shared. In the past 15 months, I cannot find where this was shared with us. Over the next 10 years, we need to deposit $4.54 million into our street fund. That's approximately $1,600 per member. That's a 28% increase over our current fees, all other things equal. And we've already been told it's going to come from fees. I have ideas on how we can fund that, not out of fees. Under that funding schedule, our percent funded will drop from 35% to an average of 28.3% over the 10-year period. That's a 20% drop from where we're at today. 28.3% puts us in the poor category, weak to poor category. And folks, why hasn't this been reported to us before? I believe it should be. I've been involved in finance for a long time. It's called selective financial management reporting. I get it. I understand why we did it. Last but not least, folks, I said it day one, and I'll still say it now. I've never said we can't afford a $650,000 building or even a $500,000 building. I'm saying at this time we shouldn't afford that kind of building until our balance sheet is shored up and our reserves are better than weak to poor or even lowest quartile of average. But our bylaws make it difficult for us to hold our board accountable, and we need accountability for this kind of stuff. I'm about out of time. I'll be here until noon for questions, but folks, if this isn't the culture that you want for our POA in this area, vote for change. Because I think pretty much every candidate up here is going to bring their own kind of change to our board. If you like this culture, don't vote for change. But in the end, folks, as your trustee, I'm always going to be an advocate for this community first. I'm a 20-year resident. I care about this community, and I care about our culture. Thank you for your time. Let me get my goodies. Back there. Thanks.
Thank you, Michael. Next up is Dwayne Swanky. Dwayne.
As I mentioned the other night, I'm not going to be your most eloquent speaker up here, and I don't know if I can follow that, but man's prepared. I have 35 years experience in commercial construction. I'd like to think that the things I've learned over those years that I could bring to the community to help bring us through transition of us controlling things and having to maintain and take care of all of our assets, that I might lend some support there with, cheaper ways to do it or less expensive ways to do it that would benefit the community. My my goal is to make sure that we get everything we can for our dollar, whether it's maintenance, whether it's the building we're doing, whatever the case might be, whether it's dealing with the developer. That's another thing that I think we need to approach. He has assets out here that he needs to maintain. We have a vested interest with him that it affects our property values. And if he's not maintaining that, then it's kind of hard for us if we decide to move on to sell our house with the amenities that are being presently maintained. So I think it's important that we get with them in a manner that's, a vested interest between both parties, to try to work something out to where they give us some kind of plan on what they're going to do and how they're going to do it, the process, if they're going to add any amenities. We have a changing demographics out here, got a lot more families moving in with smaller children, not aside from grandparents with grandchildren, being here. There's things that could be added that would help with that, whether it's another park, whatever the case might be with that. Believe that with proper approach that we can work something out with them. I'd like to ask if anyone would have any questions along those areas that they would like to ask of me.
Yeah, shocking, right? I want to know the current situation we have. It feels very much like when we approach the board, the door is closed. There's not an open-minded hearing. Mm-hmm. How do you propose that the community could be more involved in not the decision-making process? Because you can't have 2,000 people making a decision, but at least ideas.
You talking about like what they like to see from the developer?
What they like to see, I can use the building as an example. Mm-hmm. Because it took basically pitching a hissy fit before we got a board of knowledgeable people to think about what would happen. So, I think it might be beneficial to have several little groups for planning, but I want to know what your thoughts are.
Well, you could do that, of course. I think you should start out with a survey, find out what is on the minds of the community, what they're looking for, what their complaints are with, not only with the community as we run it, but what the developers doing, and see where we can, you tackle, I guess, the smallest task first, get you some momentum and move on up. That's how I would approach it. And if you see that you need to develop a committee, maybe it's a developer committee that works just with the developer work on stuff. That might not be a bad idea. There's a lot of knowledgeable people in this community, whether they're still working people or whether they're retired. They all have something to lend to this community that can help. We all have the same one thing in mind, our property values. It's your greatest asset that you have. So, and I think that's important to the whole community. Yes, sir.
What's your thought about the bylaw that was developed for a developer, not for the property bylaws, making the changes as was spoken about capital expenditures coming to property owners, etc., versus just to have a blank check and know, 5 members being voted, making decisions about capital expenditures without any checks and balances. That was great for a developer, but now when property owners own.
I would say that you talk about 5 people making decisions. There's also room for expansion there. It can expand up to 7. And with the growing community, that might not be a bad idea. Brings a little more ideas to the table. I think the bylaws do need to be addressed because, as we have found out, there's a conflict in our bylaws versus what 2 different laws are in conflict say. So that really needs to be addressed. That was very confusing to a lot of people, disappointing to a lot of people from that standpoint, but they do need to be addressed, and they do need to become more member-friendly and not so much developer.
Have they looked at the cost of redoing the bylaws? Because that's a significant amount of money that's going to need to rewrite the bylaws. I mean, does anybody know how much? I mean, you're talking about going from not to scratch, but I mean, the input and everything. Has anybody even looked at the cost?
Well, I don't know if they've looked at the cost. I haven't, but you have several members and an operation committee associated with the board right now that are attorneys. I'm sure they're taking a look at some of this. They discovered the conflict in the bylaws and the laws and brought it to the attention of the board. So I would think they have enough knowledge to be able to rewrite some of that, present it to our council for final approval, whoever that council might be, if it's who we have now or if it's a new council, whatever the case might be. But I think that needs to be done. So, yes, sir.
My question relates to communication between the board and the homeowners. And I spent my career in accounting, and it's the financial information or the lack of information that concerns me. My example I'm going to give you this morning would be the budget. All we got for the budget was this little bitty couple of summary things. I asked for a detailed budget from the board and never received it.
Sure.
I was able to get the detailed annual budget once the July financials were out. And I can tie some of the numbers on that summary and some of them I can't. How do you feel about giving the homeowners more information? For example, when you present the budget, can we see this is the budget that we're proposing, and this is how it compares to what we think the current year is? What's the dollar increase? What's the percentage increase? To me, that's the information that any company would be able to provide. How do you feel about the amount of communication financially that homeowners are getting?
I think it could be improved. I think the budget could be provided in a more detailed manner. I'm into details, so I would like to see, if there's a line item, don't roll it up into a big number. Let's see what the line items are. Let's see what we're paying for. I mean, if it's reasonable, it's reasonable. But to digest a $1 million number when it's broken down by 100 different things or more, it would be nice to know that. So I would say that should be conveyed. I mean, we're the property owners. We're put the board in place to represent us. They're trustees. That means they're trustees of our money, of the community, and they should share that information with us for our comfort level. You know what? If they put it out there, we don't read it, that's our fault. But I think they should share it.
You brought something up that makes me want to ask a question. I'm sorry.
She had her hand up first. Ma'am? Yes.
What is the current process for changing the bylaws?
I think the change of the bylaws is member approval, if I'm not mistaken. No? It's unilateral. It's unilateral? Is that what's changed? Okay, it's unilateral. Sorry. Yeah. Right. That's something that probably needs to be put into the new bylaws, that it needs to be member voted on. That's my opinion. I'm transparent. I like everything out there. Can't accuse me of any improprieties, anything. That if it's there, we've shared it with you. I'm not hiding anything from you.
So
represents the board. That doesn't feel, I mean, represents
The developer.
what's the word? Thank you, developer.
Right.
So to me, that feels adversarial if we get into a problem with the development. So where do you stand on separating those orders?
Well, I've never had a divorce, but I don't think if I did, I would have the same lawyer. Okay? So it's, and I don't know how adversarial it was between the developer and the board. I mean, I'm new here. But I'm certain that there's some things going on there, and it's not good practice, in my opinion. So, anybody else?
How long have you lived in the neighborhood?
We bought our property in May of 2016. Built our home, moved in February last year. Well, I give you a few of my accomplishments as far as buildings that I've done that everybody might go to. Cynthia Woods Mitchell Pavilion, the original facility, I built it. You've been there, it's a magnificent place. Airport, George Bush International Airport. Mickey Leland International Airlines building, which is Terminal D now. Worked on it when it was being built. The tunnel expansion, did a bunch of that. Did a bunch of tunnel renovation out at the airport. God forbid if you ever have to stay at this place in Galveston, the Ronald McDonald House. I mean, it's a beautiful place, great charity. If you got to stay there, there's a lot of things going on. So that's really all I have at this point. Unless there's
One question,
Earl?
sir.
Yes.
Will you pledge, if you're elected to the board, to keep the community involved and to work with friendship and I don't know the fancy word, even though
Camaraderie?
I'm a college professor, with the integrity that most of the board has shown at this point to work together?
Yes, I will. I may be in opposition on some things, but that doesn't mean there's not common ground. And that doesn't mean I'm not open to listen to how things were arrived at. I'm pretty open-minded. So I think that I can work with anyone on anything.
As a college professor, I would always say most, not all.
Right.
You
Sure.
always room to have some knowledge.
Well, you're going to butt heads at times, but you got to come to a conclusion and move forward. It's in the past. I think I've shown that ability to work with a committee, working with the building committee on, dissecting the project, figuring out where we can get our best, our full dollar, so to speak. So, good process when it's followed.
Yes, thank you.
Anybody else? All right. Thank y'all. Thanks for coming.
Thank you, Dwayne. Next up is Terry Gent. Terry.
Good morning. My name is Terry Gent, and I'm standing for re-election to the Bentwater Property Owners Board of Trustees. I want to thank the audience for being here, and I want to thank my fellow candidates for committing their time and energy and expertise to run for the board. It's not an easy job. What I have found over the last 7 years of my volunteer service to this community with the Bentwater Civic Association for 4 years on their board and 3 years as their president, and for my period of time when I was on the advisory board of the Property Owners Association, and for the last 14 months as a trustee, that the most valuable thing we have in Bentwater is the people. It's not the streets, it's not the buildings, it's not the country club, it's the people. We all live here, we all enjoy living here, and we are incredibly blessed by living in this community. I've had the opportunity to meet 200 or 300 people in the work that I've done on these various boards and positions, all strong, all good people, all for the community of Bentwater. What have I learned? I've learned that change takes place. We have, in fact, incurred or have experienced a great deal of change from the time I got involved with the BCA and watched the Property Owners Association Board change and evolve. It's a growing community. It's a changing community. And yes, the demographics are changing. I'd like to correct a little bit of something that Michael said. It's not 1.3 billion, it's 1,067 million dollars is the current assets, assessed value of Bentwater. This is from the tax assessor. And you might be also interested to know that the combined assessment for the country club, and it's three organizations. It's the Bentwater Yacht Club, it's the Bentwater Yacht and Country Club, and it's the Bentwater Country Club. Those three, and the Bentwater on the North Shore Limited, that's a combined $17 million. That's what they're taxed at. So the rest, part of it is in mud, part of it is in the POA. We have an assessment of it's around $67,000. So our property is assessed much lower than the homes. The church has a value of about $2.7 million. It will go up because we are building a new fellowship hall. As you can see, the construction coming in at the west gate. So the community has an assessed value of over $1 billion. And that includes all of the lots and the homes. So it's not 1.3. What I've heard so far is that the POA is broken, that it's in terrible shape. That's what I'm hearing. But I can tell you it's not. The POA is financially sound. All the books are audited. We have no negative comments on our audit. There's no money being hidden. There's no money being inappropriately spent. So, do we need to have changes? Do we need to get that information out there? It's out there. You want to see it? Come to the POA office. You can see it. But there is a danger in putting up your entire budget on websites, which anybody can see. If you go to the websites of most of the HOAs or POAs around, and there are a lot of them, go and look. You'll find some information not dissimilar to what we post. But think about it. If you're responsible for a budget that's over $3 million and a line item for subscriptions, do you want somebody telling you that, no, you should reduce that by $50 or $150? Is it really important? If you have elected board to develop a budget, then you should be able to put your trust in the fact that that budget's going to be developed and it's going to be a fair and equitable budget. If you don't trust the board, then elect a new one. So change is hard. We've been through a lot of change. What I would like to say is that we have, regardless of the board, we have the best POA staff around. They have embraced the change. They have worked hard through the process. With Robert Yetter's leadership, they all work for the Bentwater Property Owners Association and for the residents. There's an attitude change that has occurred, which is an attitude of service. Do you know that we have 350 to 550 members go to the POA office every month? So that's not a POA staff in absentia. They are there, they meet you face to face, and they're there to provide services, and I'm proud of them and applaud them. So, what have I done? Not much. So we do have a road and street plan for repairs. We do have a first-time reserve plan for the first time in the history of Bentwater. Is it perfect? No. Do we have all the answers? No. But it is a darn good start. The street and road plan has a 5-year rolling plan, and that's all we can project out, folks. I can't see much more than 2 years out in terms of the street conditions, but we've made great progress. We're in our second year. We're under budget and ahead of schedule. So we've pulled some things out of the third year that we thought might be done in the third year into the second year. So I'd be happy to share any of that with anybody. We've got now plans for repair and maintenance of all our hard assets, including the bulkheads, the mailboxes, and the walls along the brick walls. So this is all with concurrence and acceptance and assistance from the POA staff. They've embraced these plans to move forward. Michael said he's not a politician. If he's not a politician, I don't know what I am. I'm certainly not a politician. But, you know, I'm not a policy wonk, and I'm not a philosopher. All I am is somebody who's volunteered for the last 7 years to work for this community and do the best job I can. It's been painful change. We lost valued members of our team for various and sundry reasons, but they seem to be lost at critical times. We have a board that has pitched in and worked hard. Is it sustainable? Not at 20 hours a week, but we went through a transition year, and we're not quite finished with that transition. And guess what? About a year ago today, we had an event that was called Harvey. And that event caused some changes, ultimately resulting in what is a 630-pound gorilla. It's been mentioned, that's the new building. So, honoring the staff, when we found out that the building that we were in had mold, Mr. Yetter pointed it out to us at our second board workshop, said, "Come here, look at this." There it was, growing as we watched. So what do? That week, we called and got a Texas licensed mold inspector. This is after Harvey. So they came out and looked at that with their mask on, and we were sitting there in the room, and he comes in and says, "Folks, I wouldn't work in this building, but I'll have your test results back tomorrow." So, did we have the opportunity to call folks from the community and say, what should we do? No. We owed it to our staff to get out of that building, and we did so. So if you want to challenge that was done right or correctly, go right ahead. You walk in my shoes. So what's going to happen next? We have a building committee that is approving the direction for the building. We should, by middle of the week, of this coming week, have documents that will go out to bid to 4 general contractors. We are asking those bids to be returned in early September, and we'll be on our way. What's the objectives for next year? Basically, kind of like what Michael said. We're looking at our bylaws. We're looking at our contracts with outside services, including the legal counsel, the landscaping contracts we have for our 6 neighborhoods. And we're looking at the contracts that we have with the constables. Our other objectives are, in fact, to finish the building, to work on communications, and we've come a long way in communications. We now have about 229 properties that we don't have email addresses for. It's a long way from where it was in the beginning of the term in 2017. So we'll continue with all of the efforts that have taken place and work on change as we go. What I can assure you is, though, that the board has and will continue to honor and uphold the association's vision, mission, and value statement and the board objectives therein. If you're interested in knowing what they are, go to the website and read them. 14 months ago, change was needed. Change occurred. Not all visible to the members, but all needed. It's been an interesting and challenging year. And all I can ask is that whoever is elected, that you support the existing board members and the newly elected board members, because they are volunteers. My pay didn't go up. And they are residents of Bentwater and your neighbors. So if you have problems with them, come and talk to them face to face, eyeball to eyeball. I'd like to share with you a verse from the Bible that sustains me through these efforts. It's from Galatians 6:9. It says, "Let's not get tired of doing what is good. At just the right time, we will reap a harvest of blessing if we don't give up." I'd like to thank you for attending. My name is Terry Gent, and I'm running for the Bentwater Property Owners Board of Trustees, and I appreciate your vote. Thank you.
Thank you, Terry. And now we have Michael Durham. Michael?
Good morning. I thank you all for being here. I thank our current board for volunteering their time and the great deal of effort that they've put forth so far in trying to help Bentwater and the BentwaterPOA. I will also thank all the candidates here for volunteering your time and being willing to serve if elected. Terry, I thank you for all your work on the streets. I know you've done a lot. I've heard it, and I appreciate it. And I have to recognize Dwayne, who sits on the building committee with me, for all of his hard work. He's been a big leader in trying to make sure we got this job done right for all of the property owners of Bentwater. So with that said, I'll tell you a little bit about my background, not a whole lot. I have lived in Bentwater 4.5 years since that question was asked. I have not only the house we own on Sarasota Circle, but we also have a patio home in Yacht Harbor that I have my mother-in-law and father-in-law live in. And so I am concerned about the property values if anything goes wrong in Bentwater. I have served on several boards in the past. You can look at my resume. When my wife and I lived in the 1960 Champions area, I served on the Cypress Creek Emergency Medical Services Board, served as their president for a couple of years. We then built a house, moved to Tomball, where we stayed for approximately 20 years. While there, I served on the Homeowners Association of Powder Mill. I served both on their board and as their president for a period of years. I also served on their Architectural Control Committee board while I was in that subdivision. While I was in Tomball, I got to see the other side. I actually developed a subdivision. My wife and I bought some property and developed a subdivision on the other side of west of Tomball. Very small subdivision, but have been in the developer side as well. I have written bylaws for both the developer and the homeowners. To answer the gentleman's question who left, I think you're looking at probably $2,000 roughly to get new bylaws written. I will agree. Most bylaws are written so that when the developer moves out, the homeowners take over. If in fact, and I've not studied our bylaws, I am an attorney, just so you know. But if in fact our bylaws say they have to be changed by the board, I would agree that that probably does need to be changed, and it does be a member-oriented change. I would certainly agree with that. But going forward, I think that's something that our board is more than willing to look at, and Terry has addressed that. And for that, I appreciate it. I currently sit on a couple of other boards, Montgomery County Veterans Historical Commission, which is in the process of building a new Veterans Park in downtown Conroe. I spent 4 years in the United States Navy. I'm going to set you down Thursday and teach you the difference between starboard and port. And I also sit on the board for New Danville, which is a nonprofit organization just north of Willis that deals with physically and mentally challenged adults. So that's give you a little bit of my background. Terry brought up an interesting point, and before I go any farther, I apologize. I missed last Wednesday's meeting. I had the option of fulfilling my obligation to my wife, taking her to an anniversary dinner and to see Lyle Lovett, which allows me to continue to live in Bentwater, or I could have come to the meeting, and then I probably wouldn't be running for the board because I wouldn't be a resident here any longer. So I do apologize for that. I did not bring a prepared speech, but I will tell you, Terry brought up an interesting thing, and he's right. The only thing I have is on your POA is the obligation of our vision, mission, and values. Our Board of Trustees' objectives are listed thereon. And to me, one of the most important things is to understand this is a board. Everybody on that board is a volunteer. They're not getting paid a tremendous amount of money to do what they're doing. They're doing it out of the goodness of their heart. They're doing it because they're a good neighbor. And they're doing it because they want to see our subdivision grow, both in value, population, and the other things that may be attributed to, like what Dwayne brought up, getting the developer to do a few additional things. So I would encourage you, like Terry, to take a look at our vision, mission, and values. The objectives of our Board of Trustees are on there. And that is something I think our board, current board, is trying to fulfill, and I would hope that whoever is elected to take these two board positions would also try to fulfill those objectives. A board is made up of several people. It's not a one-man show, and we need to remember that. You have to work cohesively with the other board members to try to understand what is good for the community and what may be bad for the community. Your opinion may not always be right. You have to accept that, and you have to be able to work with those board members and come to the best conclusion that would help our neighborhood and make things work in the manner that a board is designed to work. Having a board that sits and fights all the time doesn't get us anywhere. We waste a lot of time. Like I said, I think our current board, under the circumstances, has done a very good job. I would agree with your comment about financial information. The budget needs to be there, but as Terry says, it's at the POA office. Maybe that needs to be publicized. Communication is the key to anything that goes on anywhere, whether it's at work, whether it's at home, whether it's in a neighborhood. That's what you have to have is communication. Maybe the board needs to put out, if you want to see the full details, go by the POA office. They will give you a copy. I know Robert and his group is more than willing to help anybody that comes in there. Ma'am?
They didn't answer my email asking for it.
I can't answer that because I'm not currently on that board. But I do agree with Terry. I would not put it on a website. I would say if you want a copy, go get it. I'm sure Robert is more than happy to make sure you can have a copy. But in continuing, communication is always the key. I would pledge to you that I will take your phone calls, I will give you my email address, and I will listen to what anybody has to say to try to make this board better and to try to make this neighborhood better. That would be my objective. And my other objective is to follow what we're obligated to do under our vision, our mission, and our value statement. That's what I would look at, and I would encourage all of you to read that because it is important to me, and it's important to this board, and it's important to the Property Owners Association and the property owners themselves going forward. Any questions that I can answer? Yes, ma'am.
There's been a lot of talk, both you and Terry, that we can't put that budget information out on the website. Well, I'm going to tell you, if you look at the July financials, it's there. So why couldn't we give it to the homeowners at the time the budget was approved? I have gone through. I took the annual budget off the July statements, compared it to the July to the June 30th information for my own information. And it's told me some things that were not abundantly clear. It's told me that we plan to increase staff probably in both the POA itself, the POA staff, which we've been told, it looks like we're planning to increase staff in maintenance, decrease staff for the gates, most of which makes somewhat sense if we're going to be automated, but you couldn't tell that. And the information is there. So that we can't put it on the board is not a valid comment. And then we hear a lot, you praise and you praise the POA staff. Every time I have asked a question, I have not gotten the right answer the first time. It started, I didn't pay much attention to this POA at all until the building issues came up. And then shortly thereafter, I asked a question about the gate system. Would we be able to extend the hours of the back gate? Over a period of 10 days, I got all kinds of different answers. Yes, and then I got no. And then I get yes again. And then 10 days later, I get another answer from somebody who supposedly was answering the questions. And, got a whole nother. So I'm not getting good answers. Every time I've dealt with the POA staff, I have not gotten the right answer the first time or gotten a timely answer. So
I will tell you I've not been involved on the board. I will tell you that my suggestion to you is Robert is sitting right here. I would think as soon as this meeting's over, if you'll ask him what you need, I think you'll get an answer.
He's gotten my emails asking for stuff. The board has gotten my emails asking for stuff, and I haven't gotten answers.
I can't answer for why they haven't responded to your past emails. I really can't. I wished I could, but I can't. Any other questions I can answer? Yes, sir.
I'm going to ask you the same question I asked him. I didn't ask Terry because I know Terry will do it. Will you agree to work with all the other board members in a congenial manner and try to solve problems?
Absolutely, sir.
Thank you.
I think that's exactly what this says you have to do. Anything else? Thank you.
Thank you, Michael. And last but certainly not least is Linda Rios Brook. Linda.
I trust you're not laughing at me, Michael. But it would be okay, I guess. I'm not supposed to touch that. Good morning. Actually, I'm glad I got to go last. This time I went first the other night. And I just want to tell you that you cannot make a bad decision. You're going to elect 2 people, and whoever it is that you elect is going to be fine. And the only thing that you need to think about is, well, I'll share with you what. How about I do that? I'm going to tell you what I've done, and I'm going to tell you how I think, what I've learned, and why I decided to join this esteemed group and agree to stand for election. The reason I'm going to tell you what I've done and what I've learned is because that will tell you how I think about things. Most of my life I spent in broadcast television. I've worked in most departments in television, but what you're probably interested in is that I was the president and general manager of the CBS station in San Antonio, Texas, when it was the #1 television station for CBS in the country, when it had the highest rated news, when we were #1 in profitability, and when we made more in our television station than the other stations in the community made altogether. After that, I was transferred to Jacksonville, Florida. I was the president and general manager of the ABC station and then the NBC station in Jacksonville, Florida. My company was sold to Ghent, and Ghent transferred me to Minnesota. And I was the president and general manager of the NBC station in Minneapolis. In each one of those situations, I will tell you that my stations were #1 in the market, #1 in news, #1 in revenue, #1 in return on investment. And everybody liked us a whole lot. The reason that is kind of important, I think, well, let me tell you the other thing that we did. While we were there in Minneapolis, a small group of people and my husband and I saw an opportunity to buy an independent television station that had been very poorly run. We bought it out of bankruptcy for $2.5 million. And in 7 years, we sold it to Sinclair, whom you may know as the largest operator of television stations. We sold it to Sinclair for $52.5 million net to the shareholders. So that little group of people made a very good investment for 7 years. But it gave me the opportunity to understand not only working from the corporate end, but being the owner who didn't have a corporate end to turn to when things began to go wrong. All right, let me tell you why I think that's important. I'm going to make an assumption that everybody in here watches a newscast. You watch something, right, on television. I'm going to make a further assumption that you watch the same one most of the time. Do you know what makes a news team work and why people turn to it all the time? It's chemistry. When we would audition for news people, it wasn't enough that they have journalism, and it wasn't enough that they be independently good. When you put them on the set together, it had to work. And so one of the challenges that I think that you've got, I've got a vote, everybody's got here, is it isn't just a matter of what the individual talents are here, but what is the chemistry that this POA is going to have going forward. And the reason that you can be a good judge of that is you're sitting out here, you're looking at everybody up here who can be part of that. But that's one of the decisions that you need to make. What's the chemistry of this going to be? And how are we going to go forward with it? All right, so I also ran a private foundation for 7 years after we sold our television station. I've written 9 books. 4 of them are bestsellers. 1 of them is almost up there. What I spend my time doing right now, the thing that I spend my time the most on, and that has given me some of the most satisfaction in my life here, is being associated with the Assistance League of Montgomery County. I've never seen an organization like this one. If you don't know how this works, it's 100% volunteers. We do wonderful things. The thing I get to do is I'm the scholarship chairman, and we're going to give away $137,000 in scholarships this year. And this is a group of about, 250 retired women who run this thing like a clock. And I've never been associated with anything like that before. I'm also the secretary of VLO. People may think the POA runs things out here. I'll just let you know that's not true. The VLO runs everything that's fun. So those are the things that I spend my time on. All right, let me tell you what I have learned in my life. And everything that I know, I've learned from somebody else. As far as I know, except for my books, I've never had an original idea. But I've been willing to capture the ideas from someone else. When I had an interview with Trammell Crow years ago, I had an opportunity to interview him extensively. And I've always been a fan and an admirer of his businesses. And so I asked him, you know, why do your businesses run the way they do? Why are they so good? And he said, I don't really make the hiring decisions in the different businesses and the different pieces of his company. And he said, but I have 3 rules that those who do make hiring decisions have to follow. And he said, the first one is you got to hire nice people. If you don't hire a jerk, don't hire somebody who can't be civil, don't hire somebody who can't be open and transparent. There's too many nice people in the world. And he said, the second thing is you got to hire the smartest person that you can find. He said, being smart, in his opinion, trumps experience and it trumps education. Now, that might not be true, that might not be true in brain surgery. But in most other things in life, and he said, if we can get the smartest person and they need education, we'll get them education. If they need experience, we'll keep them on the job long enough to get them experience. And he said, but the way they think, the brains they come with, that's all they got. We can't improve on that. And then he said the third thing is they have to hire people that fit in. You can't be a one-man show. You just can't. It doesn't matter how good you are. If you can't get along with anybody, if you can't reason with people. And so I've adopted those 3 things throughout my life. Nice people, smart people, people who fit in. The second thing that I learned when I worked from Ghent, and that was that reasonable people can disagree. And as long as they remain reasonable people, they can find a way to agree. I don't know of any situation in life where there's only one way to do it. And reasonable people, as long as they continue to be polite and civil to each other and reasonable, recognizing that nobody's going to get 100% of whatever it is they want, that there's a way to get to a conclusion. The third thing that I learned, I wish I'd learned it earlier, is not to confuse autonomy with stupidity. Just because you have the authority to do something without getting input or buy-in from someone else does not mean you should do it. I don't know what's going to come up before the POA next year, and nobody in this room knows. And there may be an opportunity to make decisions that make us look like heroes, and there may be opportunities to make decisions like Terry lived through last year, where you're doing the best you can with insufficient information every day. But when you have to make those decisions, when you have to take risks, when you have to go out on a limb, get as many people out on the limb with you as you possibly can. And there will be fewer people trying to cut the limb off while you're out there on it. And so I don't know what we have to ask permission from the community for yet. I haven't studied that yet either. But whether we have to ask permission or not, we need to get input from the community. And so that's one thing that I promise you, that I have learned that, and I'll listen. And here is another thing that I've learned, and this is a harder one. Things may not always be what they seem, but they usually are. Things are usually exactly what they look like. That's why you can't be told that what you see is not what's happening. And sometimes we end up with a pig. If it oinks and it rolls in the mud, it's a pig. Maybe we didn't intend to buy a pig. Maybe we thought we were going to get something else, but we got a pig. And no amount of makeup and lip gloss will make it be anything other than a pig. So figure out what to do with the pig, and then go on and get the dog you originally intended to get. Why did I want to run for this board? Well, the real and honest true reason is I love this place. I love Bentwater. This is the best place that we have ever lived, and we have lived in some really nice places. And I'll tell you, I hope that this doesn't sound too Pollyannish or too trite, but it's honest to truth. I've never lived in a community of people like this. I've never lived anywhere where people just show up at your house. They just show up. They knock on the door and there they are. Places I've lived before, you have to call and make an appointment, you know, to even talk to somebody on the telephone. Here, if people even call you on the telephone to tell you they want to see you, they're in the driveway already. And this, honestly, this happens to us all the time. When the hurricane came, we had a problem. We had water coming in our house. You know, we hadn't lived here that long. It'd been a terrible year anyway. And I put on Bentwater next door. We had water coming in our house, and I didn't know what to do. And 6 people showed up at my house, ready to work and to help us with that. Our power washer went out. Larry couldn't figure out. And by the way, I will tell you, I don't know how to fix a darn thing. I don't know how to build a building. I don't know how to fix a power washer, and neither does my husband. We've been in media our whole lives. So we put out, you know, we don't know how to start this. Is there a small engine repair? Somebody pulls up in the driveway 15 minutes later, fixes it for us, won't take any money for it, leaves. This happens all the time out here. And so we have a charisma about Bentwater. It's beautiful. It's a beautiful place. We got beautiful houses. But there's a charisma about Bentwater that it doesn't exist in Walden. I'm sorry, it doesn't. We may like their dinner better there sometimes, you know. But it's not in Walden. It's not in the Woodlands. We have a treasure here. Okay, what do we need to do? We need to protect our home values. I'm like you. I've put a fortune into fixing this house that we bought. We want to protect that. I want the covenants enforced. We've got covenants out here that are to protect us. See, that's the thing, is that the rules are for the protection of the people. When people hear the POA wants to talk to them, they shouldn't have the same reaction if you get that the IRS wants to talk to you. If the POA wants to talk to you, we should have the feeling that it's because they're going to help us with something. They're going to help us fix a problem. We understand that we need to have fees. I think most people realize that we've got to have reasonable fees for things, but some of our fees are not reasonable. They're just not. If the covenants need to be reviewed, then let's review the covenants, but let's listen to what the people have to say. See, what I agree with Michael about, I guess I agree with everybody. I don't think anybody said differently about this. We need to hear what the property owners say. The one thing that I would say is, are we a business? Absolutely, we're a business. But we are much more than that. We're also in the business of service and quality of life. And we have to agree together what those things are going to be. So I don't even know how much time that I have left, but I've probably said everything I need to. So like I said, you're not going to make a bad decision. Figure out what the right chemistry is and then vote that way. Thank you.
Thank you, Linda. That concludes the presentations. I just remind you of a couple of dates regarding the elections. Postcards to the 250-something people that we do not have email addresses for will go out Monday. E-blasts also will be posted Monday, announcing that the voting will be opening, and the online voting opens at midnight on the 28th. Is that right? I think that's right, 8/28. And then the voting closes at noon on 9/27. So you got basically a month to vote. If you have problems with your voting, come to the POA office, and somebody there will help you with the voting. And then the annual meeting starts at 6 o'clock on the 27th, at which time the new board members will be announced. Thank you very much for being here.